Hi there, this is Anastasia, and today I will be discussing nonverbal communication. So, first off, what is nonverbal communication? Well, it's pretty straightforward. Nonverbal communication is a form of communication via wordless cues. This can be hand gesturing, inflection of voice, the way a person looks at you, etc. I'm sure we've all heard the saying, if looks could kill. Usually that saying is referring to when a person glares at you menacingly and you understand by the look in their eyes that you've done something to upset them. Now that we have a little understanding of nonverbal communication, let's take a look at a couple slides and I'll give you my interpretation of what their cues say to me. And I word it like this because it is important to understand, especially with nonverbal communication, messages can be lost in the translation. If you haven't actually talked to the person or discussed what it is they're thinking or feeling, you don't know for sure what they're communicating. This first slide I named admiring. This picture shows a man who is satisfied with his work. The picture is zoomed out enough to notice a man hammering something on an anvil. Whatever the item is that he's creating, he seems to approve. His eyes are relaxed, but his mouth is pulled into a small smile. He appears to be pleased with his work. Some other things to point out is hammering something on an anvil is probably a pretty daunting task. However, if you notice, there's no real strain on his face. He doesn't have super tense body language. His shoulders are dropped a little bit. So I would say whatever is going on with the work he's doing, he's pretty pleased with it. The next slide I named surprised. This man is pleasantly surprised. He has a look of amusement on his face from his wide eyes and big laughing smile. I believe he was surprised because of the nervousness of his hands. He is stroking his hand through his hair and adjusting his hat. Something or someone causes him to feel as though his current appearance wasn't sufficient, so he went to fix this. I've oftentimes noticed with a lot of people that when they're confused or upset or something disrupts whatever state they're in, they'll take their hand and comb their fingers through their hair. My interpretation of this is it's a relaxing, soothing thing and almost a nervous habit. However, he stopped whatever work he's doing and he's smiling while he's nervous. So maybe it's an old friend, a girlfriend perhaps. Maybe his wife came to visit him out in the field. I don't know. This next slide I named Epiphany. This man looks like he may have remembered that the stove is still on. He is dressed nicely and seated to have his picture taken. This means he probably knows it is expected of him to smile and look into the camera, because that's typically what we do when we have our picture taken. However, his eyes are averted, and it looks like he's thinking of something. If you notice, there's a little bit of an open space between his mouth. Consciously, people don't just sit there with their mouth open. So I think whatever thing that just popped into his mind, it took him by surprise from his wide-eyed expression, and he's not consciously thinking of the things he's doing with his face while getting his picture taken. He also has a pretty rigid look to him. Now, he may be trying to sit straight for the picture, or maybe he's a little bit tense because what did I not do correctly? Contemplating. Hand on hip, dropped shoulders, relaxed stance, averted eyes, not the same direction as her face is facing. I believe this woman is giving something some thought. Her head is turned from the direction her eyes are looking, which makes me think she's not focusing on the object that is in front of her, but rather whatever thought is on her mind. When I look at this, my interpretation is she was just delivered some news or perhaps a proposition, and she's not so sure she's all for that. So she's going to sit there a moment and give it some thought and be thoughtful with her words before she gives the person a response. And here's a little quote I found that I thought went really well with these slides. There are no facts, only interpretations. And I've used the word interpretation several times because, as I said earlier, when looking at someone's nonverbal communications or trying to pick up on their cues, sometimes they're not always directed at you, so we kind of make something up in our head about whatever we think that means. This can either be a good thing. An example of that is flirting. If you like a person and they smile at you and you think, oh, this person, they smiled at me. They might really be into me, which maybe they're not. They might have just been smiling at you to be nice. You don't know. However, you interpreted that smile, their nonverbal communication, as flirting and them taking an interest in you. A negative example I put was sighing, exasperated. When I was growing up, if my parents told me to do something and I sighed, that was a big no-no. That would almost cause a blowout. You don't do that. Now, when you're a teenager, teenagers huff and puff and sigh. It's part of our thing. We just have breathing issues. Well, in my household, that was unacceptable, and they would take it as a sign of disrespect. And as I said before, it was not intentional, and my parents misinterpreted my nonverbal communication, and therefore it resulted in unnecessary conflict. So that's the end of my slide. I hope I gave you a good overview of nonverbal communication. I'd like to know if we had the same thoughts on these pictures, and I wish I could talk to these people to know if maybe I got some of their cues correct. Thanks so much for listening.